Hi guys, you're watching the Watch Hobbyist channel with me, Wayne, and today I just wanted to look at travel watches and GMT watches. Now, there are other uses for GMT type watches, such as if you work in an environment where you have offices worldwide, that you may want to know what time another office is going to be open or is closed, sort of thing. But for me personally, and for the majority of people that buy these types of watches, I would imagine it's for travel, and they can come in really handy. So generally it's a watch that would allow you to use the time in both where you are, but also know the time back home or in another country. So in this example, now the video, I must admit, is about a year old, so it will look different to my recent ones, but I actually found it when I was clearing out my computer recently. But in this example we have all sorts of different types. Now at the beginning of the video I do actually say that I don't know of any other types of GMT watches. Now there's three more I can think of at this point. There's the Panerai type, where it has like a secondary hour hand that goes around the dial every 12 hours, so not a 24-hour hand like you see on the Rolex GMT, which we see here, but a 12-hour hand instead. So that's actually quite a good complication, and it also means that you can hide the hand behind the hour hand as well, so you end up where it just looks like a 3-hand watch rather than a 4-hand. So that's quite a cool thing. The other type that I can think of is, if you've watched my recent reviews, you'll see a GMW B5000 G-Shock. Now Casio G-Shocks and other digital watches, of course, have for many years had world time facilities, and the GMW B5000, which I've reviewed and gone into all the iPhone app with it and everything because it's a connected watch, that's a really good way of utilising secondary time zones, so have a look at that if you haven't already seen the review. And the third one, of course, is watches like smartwatches. So we have things like the Apple Watch, and they can be really good for travelling and things like that as well now. So there are other types apart from what's in this video, but this video will definitely give you a gist of the watches out there. The other thing I want to say as well is make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Give me a thumbs up at the end of the video if you liked it, hopefully you will. 2 thumbs down if you didn't, and also please make sure you check out my Patreon, and please also have a look at my Instagram if you want to see my latest watches. Let's jump into these watches and see what they're all about. So as I've got quite a few travel watches at the moment, as you can see, I thought I would go through them and show you all the different types that I know of in terms of watches that can show secondary time zones. So if you travel quite a bit like I try to, then it becomes sometimes quite a handy feature to have a GMT complication. It's actually probably my favourite complication of all watches out there. Even though sometimes I'll only travel an hour ahead in time zones, I still find it's just really cool having a GMT function, a watch that can show 2 times at the same time, and it's become a big part of my collecting over the past few years. But there are many different types, and when you go to a store or you read the marketing, some watches can sound really useful for this, but in fact I don't find them so useful. I find them a bit of a faff, and that's why I just wanted to show you all the different types that I know of, and I can go through them a bit. So in my opinion, the daddy of all GMT watches is the GMT. It's the Rolex GMT. It's the one that really kicked it off mostly, and in the early years it actually didn't really have a great GMT complication, but then as time went on, Rolex created the independent hour hand. So what happens is you screw the crown out to the first position, pull it out to the first position, and then you can independently adjust the hour hand. You've got a 4th hand here, which is a GMT hand, and that basically shows you all the time, so it shows you the time back home. So that stays exactly where it is. You land at your new destination, you adjust the time, you now have the time and date in your current location, but you also have the time back home in a 24-hour format. And also with this watch they took it one further, and you can actually move the bezel, and with that you can then tell maybe a 3rd time zone as well. So it does actually work really well. I think it's the best form of any GMT function that there is, and that's why I wanted to compare all the rest to this. So it's not to say that the others are no good for it, but it's just for me that's the most logical version. It makes the most sense. You land in your new destination, you just set the time to the new destination. You've not had to mess about setting the time for your home location or anything like that. It just works. It's really clever, and it's simple, and it's a great idea. So that for me is the one to compare them all to. Now you may disagree, but I personally think that's the best one. So then we have what I think is the most popular, would be something like this watch. Now this has a movement that's based on an ETA, so it's a Swiss automatic movement, and it's a fantastic movement, but in this case the second time zone is the thing that you set independently, and I don't think that works as well. So I'll show you what I mean. So we unscrew the crown, and again we go to the first position, and now when I turn the crown, I'm now adjusting what was the fourth hand, well, what is the fourth hand on this, but what was the fourth hand on the GMT. Whereas before on the GMT you saw me adjust the actual main hour hand, which was telling me the current time. So I'm adjusting this. Now what I'm never probably going to get used to is reading my current time from this this fourth hand, because that's pointing to a 24-hour track around the dial. And for me, that's just not a successful way of telling the time quickly and easily. I'm sure if you do it all the time, you'll get used to it, and you just set it, you know, to whatever. And your home time has stayed the same in this case, but now we're using this hand instead to read the time. And I just think because the numbers are quite small, they're quite hard to see, especially on this watch, around that track, around the dial, I just don't think it's as clever a way to read the secondary time zone. And it's, in my opinion, with this watch, what you would do is you would land at your destination, you would get this hand to your home time, then you would pull the crown again and you would set the actual main time, or however you would do it, and it just becomes like a 2 or 3 part process versus the just boom 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 done with the GMT or the Rolex GMT. So that for me is not the greatest way to have a GMT scenario going on with your watch, and I don't recommend it. But you know, if you've already got that and you're happy with it, then great, but for me that just doesn't work so well. The next option doesn't involve too many mechanics actually. It would be a scenario like this, where your timing, your secondary time, is actually on the bezel itself. So this is classed as like a UTC bezel, Universal Time Coordinated, or whatever it is. And in this case, so it's currently 11 o'clock. I'm just to make it easy, I'm gonna put this to 12 o'clock. Okay, so we're now in our hometown in England and it's 12 o'clock, and I now fly to New York, and that's 5 hours behind. So when I land at New York, I pull the crown out. I mean, not too much success here. There we go. Right, pull the crown out. I wind the time back to 7 o'clock, 5 hours behind. I push the crown back in, and then I turn the bezel so that the 12 o'clock is at the number 7. So I now know it's 7 o'clock where I've landed in New York, but it's 12 o'clock back home. So it's a great way of keeping track on time easily to a degree, but now we're on a 12-hour system, and therefore you're going to have to remember if it's day or night at home. So obviously probably not that difficult, but just something to take into account. And it just, for me, it is the second best of the sort of automatic watches, the second best method of doing it. I went on holiday last year to America actually, and it was 5 hours behind, and I used a watch that had a similar bezel system. Sorry, it had the 1 to 11 scenario going on, and it was fine. I had no issues at all. Once I'd set it, and it was absolutely perfect. But I do think that the Rolex GMT still trumps this, because again, there's less steps to actually get it to the time that we need it to be. So now we move on to the quartz watches. These watches all run off some kind of quartz scenario. So this particular watch here, this is a Breitling Aerospace. It's one of my favourite all-time watches because it's so light and also just looks really good in any situation. It's quite a sturdy sort of watch. But if we change the time here, so you'll see we have actually time zone 2 is actually, well, time zone 2 is actually currently right. I've not set this watch since the clocks went forward or back or whatever. So right now we have the main time zone what it thinks is at home at 11:15 nearly, and then 12:13 is the second time zone. So I've gone to, this is England, this is Spain or whatever. You can set it by pulling out the crown, and you can set it in various different degrees. So that's half an hour, and you sort of have to do it in various different ways. So if you set it quickly, I think it's 1 hour. I think if you set it slowly, it's half an hour, or the other way around. So it's a little bit fidgety. The crown is quite small on this watch, but this particular movement can be found in other watches. I think there's, or certainly a version of it. There's a Hamilton that has it. I think it's the Khaki Flight Timer, and then there's also the Tag Heuer Chrono Timer. Maybe another Tag Heuer F1, I think used it a while ago. But similar sort of scenario, maybe not the same movement, but a similar type of movement, where you basically have the second time zone on the digits. Now, again, it's all right. It works quite well, but the problem is that if you fly somewhere and it's, and you've got the different time zone going on, and then it's night time, well, you're always going to see this hand. These hands here, they're always going to be illuminated because the lume is fantastic on this watch, but the time you really need to be looking at now, because it's a secondary time zone, is this in the digits here. So you actually have to sort of illuminate that with the crown so you can actually see what time it is. So there's no quick glance going on. So still, although it's fantastic, still in my opinion not as usable as the Rolex GMT, but a completely different type of watch. So that's that one. Then we have this little Seiko. This is one of my favourite watches that I've ever owned. They're quite hard to find now, these, but it's called the Seiko 7T59. That's the number 7, T for Tango, 59. And this watch actually does have an independent hour hand. So Seiko are pretty good at independent hour hands. That's how they tend to do their GMT movements. I think it's this crown here that I pull. Yeah. So this little crown at the bottom right, I can now set the independent hour hand, and this sub-dial here is showing me the time back home. So I've got the day, I've got the date, I've got the normal time, I've got the hour hand for, well, I've got the hour and seconds hand basically in this left hand sub-dial, and that's basically giving me the time back home, sorry, hour and minutes. So very kind of useful. That's a little bit small, but I've never really found it an issue. But to be honest with you, because I'm so precious about this watch, unfortunately I don't wear it that much anyway, because it's really rare to find one in such good condition anyway. I've kept this in really nice condition. So this is probably one of the best GMT watches you could ever buy, because you know exactly what's going on straight away. You know even what day it is. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but when you go on holiday and you just relaxed and you chilled out, within about 2 or 3 days you've forgotten what day you landed, what day you're going back, what day it is. So it's actually pretty good to have the day on the display. But this is, believe me, I've searched, it's one of about 3 or 4 watches I think ever in existence to show absolutely everything in an analog format out on the display. So your day, your date, your home time and your current time in the place you are, and also have a chronograph function. In this case it has a fantastic chronograph actually, but I'm not actually sure if the battery's died. I think the battery's died on it, but the chronograph on this actually, it has a 1/100th of a second chronograph. It's a really cool watch. But anyway, I'm sort of going off on one there. Right, so final one, and this is actually probably my travel watch of choice if I'm going somewhere I don't really know, or somewhere where I don't want to risk taking a Rolex GMT. This watch, it is quite large, I must admit, but this watch has the same setup as the Rolex GMT. So there are quite a few Seikos that have this setup. This is a kinetic movement, so you have to be quite active to keep the charge in the watch. But I've managed, and it's been absolutely fine. I've never had any issues with it. I've found it very accurate as well. And basically all you do is you unscrew the crown. We've got, what I'll do is I'll move the time on actually so you can see all the hands correctly. Okay, so, and I'm also going to switch my other light on, which just went off, so it'll probably go off again soon. Right, so we can see now we've got the main hour hand is the totally loomed hand. We've got the minute hand, we've got the second hand, and the fourth hand is just a little triangular sort of hand there. It's got like a hollow section to it. So not the most visible, there we go, my light went off. Not the most visible, but it works well enough, and it does actually have luminescence to it as well, so at night that's pretty good. So in this case we want to go an hour ahead, so sorry, it's that way or whatever, you know, basically that hour hand, that main hour hand, is independently adjustable, and that is exactly the same therefore as the Rolex GMT. So this is a really good option. Something like a Seiko, something like that, is a fantastic option for going travelling. This watch has incredible luminescence all around the dial, 3D markers. It's not got the day, but it does have a date here. So, you know, it's your choice really. You also have obviously the timing bezel, it's a diver's watch. So this, something like this is a really great option for just, you know, knocking about while you're travelling and not worrying about an expensive watch on your wrist, you know, that sort of thing, if that does bother you. But then of course the GMT is, like I say, still the one for me, because it really just allows me to do exactly what I want to do in terms of just being able to quickly change the time. It's very legible, very easy to read. The date's nice and big with the Cyclops, which I know is a point of contention for some, but I actually find it very useful because the date is quite small otherwise. And yeah, just a great all-round option. So I hope you enjoyed that video with all these GMT watches. You may not have known there were so many out there, hopefully, and it's just giving you some more knowledge on the subject. But please make sure you give me a like for this video by hitting a thumbs up, and just make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again very soon.